So the White House knew what you were doing.
We briefed our plan on securing the 2020 election, securing the critical infrastructure or the systems associated with our election infrastructure. You know, we briefed fairly extensively through the national security intelligence community about these voting machine manipulation claims. We briefed members of the Hill on the claims that these machines were under undue foreign influence and could flip the votes. We shared with them that they were nonsense and why we knew that and the security controls and resilience measures in place. And so we did our job to share that information, and everybody, for the most part, got it.
Mr. Giuliani, are you ready for Colonel Waldron?
Colonel Waldron is our first witness, and I'll ask him a few questions, and then he will make his own presentation, and then, of course, you're perfectly free to ask him any questions that you want. Colonel Waldron, did you have the opportunity to examine any of the Dominion machines that were used in this election?
Yes, sir. Our team looked at some machines and software up in Michigan.
So you know that Dominion machines were used in Maricopa County to count the vote.
Correct.
And they were also used in Michigan.
Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania.
And the machines that you observed, took a look at, were able to examine, were used in the Michigan vote?
Correct.
Now tell us a little about Dominion. Dominion is a company that makes voting machines and voting calculation machines?
That's correct. They've got full end-to-end election, equipment and software.
And the actual software in the Dominion machine, is that Dominion software or is it someone else's?
Dominion is more of a hybrid. Over the years, they've acquired other voting companies, Sequoia and Premier.
Sequoia is the company that was involved in the very serious miscalculation of the Chicago vote in 2007, wasn't it?
I believe that's correct, yes, sir.
And they were using Smartmatic software, right?
Correct. And the software, the licensing agreements are pretty well. It's a good spider chart for all of these companies. They all share a common DNA in the software code.
And that company, Smartmatic, their roots are in Venezuela, isn't that right?
Yes, sir. Hugo Chavez was one of the founders, and invested, I think, 28% ownership in the initial setup of the SGO election systems.
And they have been involved in several South American elections that were fixed, altered.
Argentina, Bolivia, Singapore, Venezuela, Italy, several.
And just to simplify things, and we can make this available to you, and we have several witnesses that go back to that period of time who were involved in the vote fixing, who have looked at the vote pattern in Arizona and elsewhere and said that the pattern matches the way in which Dominion and Smartmatic, companies like that, fix votes. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
And what did you, well, let me ask you this other question. One of the former officials of the United States government, a gentleman named Chris Krebs, the former DHS official, shortly after the election, he made an announcement that many of these people refusing to take a look at any evidence are relying on. What did he say?
Mr. Krebs was the director of CISA at DHS, and he basically said that this election was the most secure in history.
The most what?
Most secure in history.
The most secure in history.
And partially that was because the states do an excellent job of validating voter rolls, and that this equipment is not connected to the internet. That was in his.
He said this equipment which was largely Dominion and several others, is not connected to the internet. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, is Dominion on his council?
Dominion was on Mr. Krebs' Election Security Advisory Council.
And is there, and we'll get to it with the witnesses, is there substantial evidence, not only here in Arizona, but in other states like what we presented in Pennsylvania, that Dominion was in fact connected to the internet?
Are you referring to information other than the user's manual?
Well, let's go back to the user's manual. Tell them about the user's manual.
The Dominion Suite user's manual is about 1.5 inches thick. My team went back to the user's manual and looked at all the instances where in the user's manual it tells operators to connect the Ethernet cords to the router, and it is the systems are connected to the internet.
And then what evidence do you have that there actually was connection to the internet?
Our teams looked at spider graphs of the Dominion network on election day and showed the increased web traffic, internet traffic on election day for Dominion servers.
So on election day, Dominion was communicating by internet?
Correct.
Contrary to what Mr. Krebs said or thought?
That is correct.
And tell us now, how do they take us through how the vote can be modified, and then take us through what you saw in the machine in Michigan, where they did actually modify the vote?
So my background in the military, started off my career as an air cavalry officer, flying helicopters, counter reconnaissance. I moved later into information warfare as an information operations officer, running psychological operations, computer network operations, deception, operation security, and electronic warfare, special electronic warfare. And our team has been researching this specific issue since August of this year. We are working with another team that's been intently working on this voting machine manipulation for about 2 years when it became apparent in the Ted Cruz and Beto race in 2018, as well as the Kentucky governor's race with Matt Bevins. We saw significant anomalies in those races, and that's kind of the experience or our background working with this system. And I would tell you, as an unconventional warfare information operations, information warfare specialist, the American populace is facing an unconventional warfare scenario, and this is information warfare. The voting systems in the U.S. and Arizona, Dominion, and several of the other machines were built to be manipulated. And as the mayor said, they've been used in elections around the world with questionable results. And we believe that these same questionable results are present in this election. Again, my background as an information warfare officer is how to get in and corrupt these machines to conduct strategic influence operations. How do I get the enemy or a targeted population in a foreign country to think and act a certain way? These machines have multiple points of injection that are vulnerable, everywhere from the server level, where passwords, accesses are posted for the dark web for any hacker to get in and access them. And what they can do at the far right limit is download CSV files or like an Excel spreadsheet, change the columns, and re-upload them. And that can be done at the server level. At the operator level, if there's software, it can be corrupted. It can be manipulated with a device that is as small and as simple as a USB device, which these machines are booted up and run off of. So the little bit of history, and I can show you some charts on the DNA of these machines. But the common software goes back to SGO Smartmatic. As Mayor mentioned, they sold Sequoia voting systems to Dominion in 2010, and then Diebold spun off the Premier election system to Dominion as a result of the antitrust concerns. I believe that was also in 2010. So the bottom line is that these systems all have similar code and similar functions, and it's displayed in their operator's manual. So, I know it's kind of been, in the press, it's kind of been poo-pooed that, this doesn't go back to Hugo Chavez. But I personally debriefed the son of a Cuban intelligence officer who had firsthand knowledge, speaking with two of Hugo Chavez's family members.
I propose getting an expert to look it over. But it shows exactly what the Colonel is saying, that these machines should not be voting machines because anybody can communicate. It's like having an open computer. Anybody can communicate with them and do whatever they want with it. So we'll submit this and this to you that shows you that, that they can be changed, that they were changed, and then exactly how you can do it. Now, we know we're not saying it about any of the machines in Maricopa County, but we haven't seen the machines in Maricopa County, nor have you. This evidence is being submitted to dispute the lies that Dominion and Smartmatic are putting out, which is their machines are perfect, their machines can't be tampered with, their machines are tamper-proof. The reality is their machines are just the opposite. They're completely vulnerable. Is that right, Colonel?
And if you look up on the screen, so this is a Spiderfoot reconnaissance tool that looked at DominionVoting.com network that was analyzed on. Basically, it does show that this was connected to the internet on voting day, and the volume of traffic was significant. Yeah.
And what's in Frankfurt, Germany, that would be of interest?
Well, we looked prior to the election, one of our white hat hackers, and found that there was traffic in a Seidel server. Seidel is one of the companies, and I can show you we mentioned before the interconnectedness.
Just to make it simple, a Dominion machine that I go in and vote, it is susceptible to easily having that vote changed from the outside, or by them in particular.
By an authorized user or an unauthorized user.
By an authorized or unauthorized user?
Correct.
As
a
well?
Hacker. A hacker.
A hacker. So my vote is only as good as the integrity of Dominion and all the hackers that exist that can get into the Dominion machine.
Your vote is not as secure as your Venmo account.
Can you now look at, in reference to Arizona, the analysis you did of the vote in Maricopa and Pima counties that was reported? It's the Arizona fixing the vote chart.
So we notice a difference in Arizona versus the other states. Our team mostly focused on what we call spike analysis, which were an electronic inject of a lot of votes, and where the number of votes that were injected in a specific time period exceeded the ability of the scanners to process ballots and upload. So basically, it's a signal of a potential anomaly where we would want to go in and do forensic analysis on the ballots that were processed in those batches to analyze. The way that these systems work is that you can run votes in, run votes in, run votes in, and if you get write-in ballots or error ballots, it just accumulates them into a batch file. And there may be, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 votes in this batch file, and then the administrator or the tabulator can just go, okay, I'm ready to process batch file, bloop, and they send it, and then it records those votes. In the user's manual, there's ways that it shows that the administrator can vote that batch, in a 80%, 20%, 100%, however the administrator chooses, and that basically is a tool to allow them to move votes through the system faster. So Arizona was a little bit different. It had a pretty strong rise right up at the front, the first part of voting day, whereas the other states, and I can show you those, have a gradual increase in votes. And this may have been due to the fact that Arizona allowed early counting and tabulation. So this is 143,100 votes that were injected. That was in excess of what the machines could have processed. An anonymous email that was sent to all members of the Arizona legislature, and it was also sent to DOJ. This individual sent the email, wanted to remain anonymous, but had enough concern that he sent this to the criminal division of U.S. Department of Justice. He did not want to be included in the investigation, but the information that they recorded was what we would like the opportunity to investigate on your behalf, or a forensics team of your choosing. It doesn't matter to us. But it says that please be advised that Pima County Recorder, located at 240 Northstone Avenue, Tucson, Arizona, in Pima County, Arizona, and the Democratic Party added fraud votes in the initial count to the vote by mail totals released at 8 p.m. on November 3rd, 2020. So this coincides with what we observed in the data analytics at that spike. We weren't aware of this email until after the fact. So there were approximately 35,000 fraud votes added to each Democratic candidate's vote totals. Maricopa County had 1.9 million mail-in ballot requests. So, and those, there was a Maricopa County official on videotape that did say that they did not validate the signatures on the write-in ballots this year. So that's a 1.9 million vote fraud potential, even if it's 0.1% of the vote. There's a lot of room for error.
Could we just review that quickly for 1 second so we get it right?
Ladies and gentlemen, please, I know that you're passionate about this, but there are a lot of people in this world that want to hear this, and if we can't hear the witnesses over remarks, that deprives people of hearing the truth.
Colonel,
TTP is standard.
so repeat one more time the piece of information that I think people were shocked about, because it is hard to believe. Did you say that a Pima County official said that they didn't validate any of the mail-in votes?
That was Maricopa County.
Maricopa.
They didn't validate the signature. They didn't validate the signatures on the mail-in ballots.
And that's 1.9 million.
Correct.
And do we know who that is?
I would have to get the video.
Well, could you get it for us?
Oh, yes, sir.
No, you don't have to do it right now, but before the end of the hearing? That would render every one of the 1.9 million votes absolutely never checked for fraud, deceit, mistake. And if they're mail-in votes, that can't be done now. They've been separated from the envelope.
Correct.
That would indicate.
The
So those are basically
individual
1.9 million votes that are illegal votes.
or that had the potential to be illegal votes that weren't validated. The signatures weren't validated.
But can we determine now if any of them are legal or illegal?
If the envelopes were separated from the ballots, there would be no way to tell a ballot for candidate. You could still go back and look at the envelopes to validate the signatures, but you wouldn't know what the ballot.
And isn't that the reason you're supposed to have an observer when you do that?
That is part of the chain of custody procedures, I believe, in Arizona.
And when they talk about chain of custody, that's what they're talking about, right?
Correct.
Because a lot of witnesses are going to talk about that. So what I take from your testimony, Colonel, is that 35,000 votes were embedded for each Democratic candidate in Pima County.
Correct. That is the allegation of this email.
The allegation by the gentleman who hasn't
Correct.
given us an affidavit.
Correct.
that they were distributed based on the voter turnout carefully so they wouldn't look suspicious.
That's correct.
And that's essentially what the Dominion, Smartmatic, that's essentially their modus operandi, right?
That's their
They don't just put
CTP.
in 10,000 votes. They put it in carefully so it's hard to detect.
They move the algorithms around to different precincts until they get the aggregate number that they want and need, and then they shift the algorithms to other precincts.
Did the Democratic candidates who got the benefit of those 35,000 false votes include Biden and Harris?
According to this email, it was all local and federal races.
So if that were true, then the result of the election is totally opposite the one that they're so anxious to certify. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Now,
and again, this
you would need
email
the
was sent to every Arizona legislature that I'm
now we don't know if the gentleman is telling the truth or not,
correct.
but would it be possible if you had the machines in Pima County to be able to see if there's evidence of this?
In order to do that, there would have to be a full forensic audit from the USB that drives the voting. Yes, sir.
If you wanted to find out if the vote in Pima County were honest or not, wouldn't you do it?
Yes, sir.
And without doing it, you really have no idea.
That's correct, Ron.
Excuse me, Colonel Waldron. So I think what you're saying, and I'm going to kind of repeat this back to you, these might be pre-printed ballots to simply move through the system. Is that what you're suggesting?
There are indications, we have affidavits from Pennsylvania that there were ballots that were pre-positioned in a bobtail trailer, a tractor trailer truck. Okay. And that these ballots were, the thought was that this was a cache that they could go and grab the amount of ballots they needed and take them to the specific tabulation centers.
So let's just sum up a few of the things that you also found. Tell us about the green button in Maricopa County on the machine. And there is one witness that's going to testify that all day she saw election officials constantly pressing the green button when somebody was voting.
So what that was when a voter wasn't sure, and I believe this was also linked to another witness that's going to talk about with the differences in the pins and the Sharpies, that the Maricopa Elections Division, in early voting, they specified that only use ballpoint pens for voting, and on election day, they specified only use Sharpies. And the idea is that as the bleed through on the ballot, as the scanners would cause an error and an error ballot. By creating the error ballot, the election officials basically would slide those votes into a batch file that could be adjudicated by the election administrator or the operator. And the green button was to say, okay, there's an error, but go ahead and push cast ballot, and it punches that into an error file that can be adjudicated by the election administrator.
Now, and you examined the voter database, and your team did, right?
Say again, sir?
You examined the voter database, you and your team.
Those were actually some local Arizona folks that examined that.
So you took that from
I spoke directly
state data?
with them.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
You spoke directly to whom?
To local investigators here.
And you have here voter database discrepancies. 6,000 voters, at least, entered into database with no sex and default date of birth, and they're non-existent in LexisNexis.
Correct, and I believe there'll be a witness to discuss that later this morning.
The first thing I'd like to ask is, you spoke on system capability, and I know that much has been made of the excoriation of the state of Texas on the Dominion equipment, software, and all that. Can you provide just a very short comment on why they said, not only are we not recommending this, we're prohibiting the use of this equipment in our state?
in a nutshell, vulnerabilities that were issued, not addressed, and not fixed. There were too many system vulnerabilities.
Okay. And you also referenced a comment about DHS. And I'm struggling with, why did DHS say security for this election was the best it had ever been? Do you have any insight into that?
In my experience in life, there's generally two factors for individual. I mean, it's either competence or commitment. So they were either incompetent or not committed to learning the truth at the senior leader level, not at the operator level.
And does DHS know about the information that you've shared with us or that you're sharing with us in the process of this? Have you shared that with them specifically?
And much more.
So beyond what you're saying here, you've gone into much greater depth.
Yeah, we have relationships with our local DHS personnel in Texas, and both the intelligence divisions and CISA. When I started working on this project in August, I called them up, said, "You guys have got to come out and look at it." They did. They spent an initial 3 hours going through this data. At the end of that, one of them said, "I think I need to go outside and throw up."
Okay, so besides that, did they do anything about it?
They had multiple follow-ups. They drove up to our Dallas counterpart team, received over 600 gigabytes of data that had been accumulated over time. Our team provided them over 200 gigabytes of confirmatory data, and they analyzed that. After they analyzed, there was a passive scan done. They conducted a limited scan and determined that there were vulnerabilities. They held numerous meetings with their folks, the CISA cyber side, and the INA, which is the Intelligence Assessment Division.
And I'm sorry, CISA, could you let the folks who are watching know what CISA is?
CISA is the agency in DHS that's responsible for cyber and infrastructure.
Okay. Members, any other questions? Representative Biasucci.
One note that might be important. Members of the elections division of CISA, I was told, would never attend the meetings or the briefings that were conducted internal to DHS on the material that we had presented.
And I'm sorry, who is that did not participate?
The election security division inside of DHS.
Okay, thank you. Representative Biasucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Colonel. I just wanted to make sure I have this correct. So when we're talking about, it was Mr. Krebs? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. He stated the most secure election in history. He stated we're not connected to the internet. He stated no votes leave this country. This is all things he's stated publicly.
It's all on the CISA website, correct?
Right. So are you willing to say under oath that you have seen the connection to the internet? You have seen it go offshore to Germany, Frankfurt. Are these things that you have personally seen and can say that is not true?
Our white hat hackers, yes, they have that traffic in the packets.
So why would he make that kind of comment, do you think?
Either not knowing, believing the myth, or not wanting the truth to be known.
Thank you.
Senator Borelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Representative Bartow, any questions?
I did have one question. Thank you, Colonel. Excellent information. You described web traffic increase during the election as opposed to how do you measure the increase?
Are you talking just on the Dominion server network?
Yes.
They just look at volume of data that's moving through the pipes. And I'm not our hacker team they're the experts. I just kind of the big picture know how to to answer this, but they do measure volume traffic. Matter of fact, on the Frankfurt server on election day, there was a German cybersecurity professor that was noting that the increase in traffic was, and he related it back to COVID and said, we haven't even hit our indoors winter season yet, and we've hit the highest traffic. And he specifically noted that one of the reasons was the American elections.
And then you said Dominion sits on the board of Mr. Krabs, is that right?
That was on the CISA website.
When you say the board, what is the board?
It was their Election Security Advisory Council.
Oh, okay.
Is that accurate to say that this should not give us confidence about this being a reliable election?
Ma'am, anything that is software based can be manipulated and changed with a click of a button, or you got 2 USB drives, plug one in and you get one algorithm, you pull it out, you plug another one in, you get a different algorithm. And
Whatever.
There was an affidavit in Pennsylvania from, I think it was last week. A gentleman supervisor had a Ziploc bags full of USB drives, and they noted that he was inserting the USB drives into the machines at a much higher rate than would be necessary or that they had seen in the past. So, yes.
Colonel, what I've noticed is that about these voting machines and these plugged-in USB drives, when in fact, when we watch across this great country of ours, in many states, we have very few amount of counties compared to other states in here. You got to target 2 counties. If you notice that rural Arizona and rural Arizona legislators are up here, we're ready to go to work today. Our constituents demand it, and we demand it as their representatives to work for them to solve these problems.